tried painting with watercolor sticks yet. They are concentrated paint in stick form. I'm going to be looking at the Daniel Smith brand, which is a professional grade watercolor paint, and Lyra, which is more affordable and not as light fast, but comes in a crayon form so you can draw with it. I'll be looking at similar hues, so I'll be looking at blues and reds and yellows, and I'll be mixing them to paint cone flowers, also known as echinacea flowers. I have some in my garden and I'm looking at them right now. They're gorgeous, and I'm gonna do some loose fluid watercolors with these concentrated sticks. Here are the 3 Daniel Smith extra fine watercolor sticks I'll be working with. I have a blue, a red, and a yellow. And here are the Lyra, and in the same hues. So the difference that I know of so far is that Daniel Smith pigment, no matter in stick form or in a pan or in a tube, will last at least 150 years once you've painted it, so it won't fade with the light. I have read about Lyra, and it is not as light fast. So I'm just going to compare the pigments and how it lays down in loose form as I paint cone flowers. So the way this works is you take your stick and your brush, and you can pick up paint directly from the stick. And I'm using a sheet of paper to mix my pigment because my echinacea, some are true red, but others are orange and some are pink. So I'm starting with the Dan Smith, and I'm mixing it over here. I'm gonna move it in a bit so you can see that. So this is the Dan Smith in the red, and I am using, it is quinacridone coral. And I'm going to mix that to get an orange color. I'm going to use a yellow, and this is Dan Smith again, and it's Areolin. That's the yellow. So I'm going to put that, I'm going to basically just put my brush right onto the stick and paint it onto a sheet. You could be doing this on a palette as well, but I'm just doing it on a sheet. And then I'm going to move the two together to get an orange. So I'm going to first just try painting on the sheet with water to get a shape and see how that goes. So the cone flower has a really pronounced top, and then it has beautiful petals that come down. So we'll watch that color flow in. The petals have the points to them. This is just play, so I'm seeing what I can do with this brush to get the petals. And we might need a little bit more pigment, so I'm going to move back to the red. Again, right from the stick like that onto a palette or paper, it's fine. You could go directly onto your sheet, but I like going onto another surface so I can mix. So just getting a loose form here, not too concerned with exact representation, just for fun, and see how that goes. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to layer these colors, and then we'll see how they compare, not necessarily the hue, but how the paint lays down, how it dries. So I'll move now into that orange. So more pigment. The orange is a very intense color for the echinacea. So I'm going to put this one a little bit farther away, wait for this one to dry. So over here, the top, and see if I can get that petal to go. Let's just do this. Make sure I have enough water. Watercolor is really about making sure you have enough water on your brush, because otherwise it's similar to gouache or acrylic, which is more paint, and this is more water. So let's just see how this goes. Zero expectation, just play. So a little bit thinner petals, unless I lay down my brush, which I'm trying here. and we'll just let it see what happens. Okay, so this is, we've got the red for the Dan Smith on here. And now I'll compare with Lyra. So the Lyra, you could draw right onto the page with the Lyra. It is like a true crayon. In fact, I could wet it and dry it and draw with it, which I'll try. Again, experimentation. Over here, I'll just put a little bit. It's a pinker color. So yeah, I don't think I want anything drawn on the sheet, so I'm just going to use that to draw right onto the page for mixing. So wetting my brush, going in, and so comparison, this is the Lyra. So doing a nice little cone at the top, like so, and then getting the color on the sides so you can create some nice petals off of that. And it's not about perfection, it's play. So we're playing, we're creating some petals, some colors that aren't exact representation, and just like that. And that's fun. And I'm going to move to the yellow. So we'll go over here, get some, this is the Dan Smith. So you can draw with it, but it's intended, it's really stiff. It's very concentrated color, only a little bit of distilled water in here. And so you just pull from that, and then I guess I have more because I put some on here. So however you want to get that color out, either brushing right onto it or marking on the page. And so that's a Dan Smith, and we're going to put this one right here. So we have another one coming here. This one's the Dan Smith as well. And again, it's just getting a variation in your petal. So maybe pushing it down and dragging it, pushing it down and dragging it to get that petal form, and then the top of the flower. That's with the yellow. And let's bring in the blue. So I'm gonna just paint directly from it. It's kind of fun. So let's grab some from the top and get a lot on your brush. Bring it over here. And I'd like that to be more purple. So I'm gonna mix in the red and get myself a nice purple. So if you put these two side by side and you pull them into each other, you'll get a nice purple. So let's see how that goes. I'm going to scoot this a little bit farther away so I can get in here and do a cone, nice little cone. And then I want to try to really push my brush and get some variation in my brush stroke. I think it's more interesting that way. You don't want straight lines. Put some more red in, get some variation in the color, but it's a lot of variation. So if that happens, you can decide it's just part of your flower and that some of it is in the shade and some of it is more in the highlight of the sun. So let's get that purple going again. I'll get some purple and do some variation and make sure we have a petal that looks close to what we would get if we were looking right at it. Okay, so those two are the Dan Smith. And now let's go to, we did the red for the Lyra, so now let's do a yellow as well. So let's get a marked yellow. I'm just gonna paint that directly on. So since we did the red for the Lyra, which was more of a pink, I think I'll go next to it up here. And I think this might be dry, so maybe I can go directly over it. Glazing is painting directly over a dried part of your painting. So then you glaze on top of it, you add another color to it. So this one doesn't have as much variation with the petals, but somewhat. And that is the Lyra yellow, which is the hue itself is more intense. And let's do the blue for the Lyra. See how that goes. Again, it's a lot of painting on and marking. I don't have any blue echinacea coneflowers, so I'm gonna mix in, maybe not yellow yet. That's gonna be our stem. I'm going to mix in some of that pink of the Lyra. So I'm gonna clean my brush off and push those two together, get a fun purple. And then, let's see, this area is dry too, so I might just do another one here. Nice cone for your cone flower. And then get that nice and smooth. And then work with your petals. Make sure you have enough of your pigment and try to get some variation in your brush so that it is closer to what you see with your petals for your coneflower. So that one might come down to a tip like that. And I think I'll just keep going. So we've done the Lyra and we've done the Dan Smith, but I'm curious about that color right there. So you see the variation happening with the red for the Dan Smith. Dan Smith paints have a high mineral content, and so they will have some sediment or extra texture, but in our environment we have that as well. We have everything around us has texture, so it can serve your painting well because you end up having that variation. Now the coneflower has texture, and that Dan Smith is allowing for that texture to come through. I think I'm going to try another purple, so I'm going to bring in the Dan Smith blue, and here I am just marking on the paper. Oops. Which you can do, it's just you can't draw your actual flower on the page with your Dan Smith. It's not intended to be a crayon. So let's try this. All of these are dry, and we come in here with another one, like a larger one. Let's just see what happens if I create a larger cone flower in front and get that really juicy color. And then you come out. We're just being playful and experimenting. And then this one's just a really big one. It's larger. It's in front. These are all layered. Somehow they're part of the same plant, but this is not about what I actually see. It's just about creating something interesting to explore. So that's a large purple one with Dan Smith. I'm gonna see if there's any sediment that happens there. I'd like to do another orange, but I'm gonna work directly off of the tops again. So let's go and do this. I'm gonna grab some paint here. Okay, so we have our red from Dan Smith, and then I'm going to grab just to the top. It's gonna add pigment to this stick, but that's okay. Let's see what we end up with. I can already see that orange really happening. Just need to make sure we have enough water on our brush. So let's see, where should that one go? Let's just pull it over here on top. Again, with the glazing, we're layering paint as long as it's dry. This one's a little bit more opaque so far. You don't see through it as much. Let's see if I continue to mark on top of the stick and see what I can get. I'm trying to get these petals so they look petal-like, but also to be playful. So let's get some nice petals in here. See if we can create an interesting texture out of this. I think I need one or two more. So yellow, maybe a lighter orange. So if we continue with this yellow, it's getting really drippy, kind of messy and fun. So let's just work with that, see if we can get an intense orange, but not as dark as this one. So I'm gonna work over here, and I'm gonna be pulling in water and grabbing from this stick. This stick can be wiped off, and the color underneath is not affected by this. So that's nice. Let's do this. Let's just get some paint. This is a textured paper, so it is going to absorb a lot of water. It's gonna handle that well, and it'll also, it's great for play because you don't see texture as much. You don't see every mark as a texture. If you had a flat sheet of paper, if you had a hot press that was smooth, you would see a lot more texture, which sometimes you want for detail and sometimes you don't. Okay, this is a very large coneflower. I'm gonna see if I can get this one to be a very big petal and another big petal. Okay, so it's just becoming kind of a pattern at this point, less about a flower, more about a pattern. But I wonder if I bring in some green. So let's just work with, I am preferring the Dan Smith, but I can try the Lyra for the green. So let's take a little bit of blue, and I'll just mix it over here on the sheet. So I'll put it next to a yellow, and then I'll bring in more yellow then blue to make a nice yellow green. So we're going to take a lot of that. It's fun to work with primary colors, the reds, the yellows, the blues, because you can make any color with them. So this is a nice yellow green over here that I've made. It's similar to what I see out the window. Maybe a little too yellow, so I'll bring in some more blue from the Lyra. So now we know that the stem is the Lyra, and the stems are all straight. So let's see how that works if I just pull in the green underneath each one. Just pretend there's green happening here. This one you wouldn't really see, so I'm not going to put that one in there. This one you would. These two you would. You'd see one here. You'd see one here. You'd see one here. And you would definitely see one here. So, kind of fun to see. I guess I'll pull them up over each other because I'm not really being literal with this. It's very abstract. So this shows you what you can do with glazing. It shows you what you can do with watercolor sticks. And I think it's fun to play, especially in the summer when we have these beautiful flowers to look at. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll be showing more different types of ways to work with watercolor, different materials. I like stepping away from paint in a tube and working with sticks and pencils and poured paint in a pan and seeing what colors I can get. So Daniel Smith and Lyra, both equally beautiful. Daniel Smith has more texture, and if we were to let this set about a century, you would find that the Lyra would fade and the Daniel Smith paint would not. Hope you enjoyed this.